And I mentioned this to Kathy and she was right onto it. And she says, "Are you sure you're not bipolar?" And I said, "Oh, it's funny you say that. The GP seems to think that too." She says, "I'd be getting back in there and having another chat." So I did, and they put me on bipolar medication, and almost instantly, it wasn't completely cured overnight, but the symptoms were certainly very much improved.
Thank you for your time today and being a willing guest on the Live Experience podcast. Maybe you want to start with introducing yourself and what brings you today to share your story.
Hi, Joel. My name's Catherine Eagleson, and I've been living with bipolar disorder officially for about 22 years. Probably I've had it for pretty much since I was a child. I experienced when I was about 14. I had a very dark period, didn't know what was going on, didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to tell my parents. But I think that was really the start of it, the really dark, suicidal thoughts that I went through. Yeah, I think I was about year 9, and I travelled a fair way to school. So I actually I used to walk every morning, and one day I had this thing for about 3 weeks, and didn't tell my parents, didn't tell anybody. And then one day it just lifted. And I thought, oh, good, it's gone. And then, of course, it came back. So I think I had my psychiatrist described as several Mack truck experiences, and one when I was 21, which was a very low point. While I was at university, had some personal issues, but it was certainly tied in with the bipolar. It really, really hit me. But the main one was I was about to get married a month before, and I just had this past experience, and I was engaged before, and didn't end well. But the bad experience and the good experience, I remember the doctor at the hospital saying that they just collided, and it was enough to tip me over. It was just one massive panic attack, so that was just about, and we picked it up probably because I was about to get married, and at a time when you're supposed to be happy and joyful, I clearly wasn't. So I think in our family there's been about 4 generations of bipolar related disorder, and my grandmother suffered from it. So my grandfather was right onto it and said she needs help now. So I was fortunate enough to get it pretty instantaneously, I was very lucky.
Let's talk about, for people who don't know, can you just describe what bipolar disorder is to you? Because there's obviously a common definition which people just think, but maybe do you want to describe what it is to you? And because there's different types of it. There's bipolar 1, there's bipolar 2, there's different types of it. So maybe do you want to educate people?
Yeah, sure. The way it started for me was, obviously the black thoughts that I mentioned, and with the final, I think it was probably that third, I think it was building up and building up. I was under quite a bit of pressure at work, and then it was like one day I mentioned that the 2 experiences colliding. I was sitting at home, and it was like one giant panic attack. But the following day I woke up and there were voices. It was like voices in the head. It was like, and it was, this terrible, terrible stuff, absolute rubbish being bandied around. And I just thought, oh heavens! And then it was relentless. It just went, and it was language. Swearing and vile language, and it was like a familiar voice I knew, but you can't put your finger on these things really. It sort of sounded familiar, but it was bombarding my husband to be. It was just terrible, and I'd go to work, and you just couldn't get away with it. Get away from it. I was suffering from severe insomnia. I'd sort of be awake at 3 in the morning, and then I'd be awake at 4 in the morning, and then I'd have to get up at 6 in the morning and go. And I felt like I was going to work feeling like a zombie, and snapping at everybody, and which was very, very and also the other thing I remember was that I just couldn't stop talking. I mean, that's quite normal, really, but this incessant talking, just oh dear. But the other thing that I've experienced over the years, as my husband always used to say, if I was, because you had your ups and downs, and it took me a while. They didn't diagnose bipolar originally, that they diagnosed it as major depression, so that the medication was quite different. And I kept saying to the psychiatrist, when are these voices going to go away? They will, they will, they will. And they didn't. And it was probably took about 3 or 4 years. And it got to the point where, 1 minute I'd be quite elated about something, and the next minute I'd be just crying my eyes out on the bed. It was just, in the space of about 10 minutes. And the husband, Alex, used to say, said to my mother once, I always know when she's going down, she goes quiet, which is the calm before the storm. And I remember one day we were out at a cafe for lunch, and I wasn't feeling too great. And suddenly I said to Alex, I think we need to go. We got home, and it took about 3.5 seconds, and it just hit. And I always knew it was a bipolar episode, because I could hear distinctly. It was like a brick wall and a glass, say a wine glass or a champagne glass, something very fine, just being smashed against this, and you could hear the splinters just coming off the wall. And it never happened with anything else. So, in a nutshell, Joel.
Well, it's good to use those stories to explain what it's like, because I'm hearing that stuff in my head, because my mum was similar in regards to a lot of things, and the stresses as well. The stresses. My mum always used to she got overstressed at work or something. She'd go manic all the time. So managing the stresses was always an issue for us. But I was going to say, the misdiagnosis is something I've heard a couple of times with interviewing people, and it seems to be happening quite a lot, where they just go clinical depression first, and then it's actually bipolar disorder, which is a big risk, because, as you said, the medication is completely different from that to that, and then you have, unfortunately, this years of time where you've had to go through all this stuff because of the wrong diagnosis initially.
That's right. Well, I remember actually going. It was picked up. We actually moved down to the Bellarine Peninsula in 2005, and then I was sitting with the clinical depression diagnosis. I went to the local GP and obviously went through my history and everything. And then one day he says, have you ever considered you might be bipolar? I thought, I don't know what that means. He says, well, you come in here, I don't know whether you're going to be down there or up there from one week to the next, because I used to see him quite a lot. And I spoke to, medical modesty or whatever it is. The psychiatrist says, oh, no, it's definitely... it's definitely clinical depression. Anyway, it wasn't until I was talking to a friend of mine whose husband had bipolar very severely, and I happened to mention that my mother's always said, you're going to have to marry a millionaire because to satisfy your expensive tastes, just in joking in passing. And I mentioned this to Kathy, and she was right onto it, and she says, are you sure you're not bipolar? And I said, oh, it's funny you say that. The GP seems to think that too. She says, I'd be getting back in there and having another chat. So I did, and they put me on the bipolar medication, and almost instantly it wasn't completely cured overnight, but the symptoms were certainly very much improved. I mean, the roller coastery type symptoms went pretty much overnight. And I remember the doctor was away one day, and they had like an intern or she was in training, and I happened to mention that it was bipolar, that I'd been diagnosed with the clinical depression and the bipolar. And with hallucinations, she says, I'm surprised they even thought it was clinical depression, because auditory hallucinations are classic bipolar. So right at the start, I mean, I was saying that I was having these voices in my head, and I mean, these medical people were looking at me strangely. I thought, no, I don't think it's schizophrenia. I don't think it's that sort of, but I mean, I didn't really know. I even remember the GP, another GP, the one in Melbourne, saying one day, I mean, I think she originally diagnosed clinical depression, and I was saying, I was up and down. Oh, we don't want that, she says. We don't want you to be manic. And I thought, well, hang on, it is what it is. I mean, if I'm manic, you've got to deal with it.
Can you tell people then how do they go through diagnosing you? Because if you say family history to them, you'd think it'd be a no-brainer. My mum had her granddad or had her dad with it, so it was a family history thing. So can you just maybe talk to people, how do they actually make a diagnosis? Is it something where they just listen to you talk for maybe 5 minutes and your symptoms, and then all of a sudden they've got a diagnosis? Or what's the actual process?
Well, I think it's a more complicated than, I mean, it's human nature. Doctors can get a preconceived notion, and I know the first GP I went to, she's passed over the family history. I mean, I was sort of smiling and quite with it. I mean, I wasn't that particular day. I'd seen purple things on the ceiling rose at home. It was really quite dreadful, but it was. I mean, whether there's a misunderstanding or a lack of knowledge about what it actually looks like, it's often I've read numerous times and heard numerous times bipolar is very hard to diagnose.
Well, it is, yeah. If you're only presenting for a certain amount of time in a window, it might be hard for them to make an assessment. So once you got your diagnosis, how was it for you after that? Was there something where it was a bit of a relief, or was it something like, oh, cool, I've got a plan of attack now, or how was it since?
Well, it took me probably taken, because this is 2022, 2002, I was initially diagnosed. So it's taken me, and then the big bombshell came from the GP that I wasn't allowed to. It wasn't that I wasn't allowed to. I was ill-advised to remain in a proper mainstream employment job.
Okay.
Because, well, essentially I was a liability, I believe the word was.
Is that what they said to you?
Pretty much. This was when the entrepreneur genes kicked in, and because I mean at that point I wasn't well enough to work. So basically the message I was getting was, you're not well enough to go back to work anytime soon. So I thought, well, I've got to do something. So which is when I started dreaming up the crossword puzzle business, which is what I'm doing now, and I've been doing it ever since.
20 years in business is no small feat. And it's funny how they say, oh, you might be a liability or you might get stressed with and now you've been running your business would be a lot more hard work. That's it.
I think it's funny you say that, because I was writing my notes for this talk for Wednesday, and I thought, here I was in a secure, stable 9-to-5 job, public service. I actually thought getting out and doing my own thing was less stressful not as stressful as that. I thought, I'm not sure how I thought that, but anyway, that's how it's worked out. I mean, don't get me wrong, there've been many ups and downs, but again, you're not answerable to an employer, and heaven forbid that. I mean, these days, since COVID, I mean, employers, I mean, they've got issues with burnout and stress and all the rest of it. One little person with bipolar was hardly going to really upset the apple cart, I would have thought.
No, exactly right. And I really annoys me hearing a doctor would say that to you because they should be working with. I've known a few people with bipolar disorder who run successful businesses, and there might be the only change really is there might be a time like maybe a couple of months a year or maybe every 2 years where they might have a bit of a bad patch and sort of go missing for a bit, but then they're back into it and away they go.
Yeah,
and they're
absolutely.
very creative and very good people. And to hear that sort of happens to you, it's very, very frustrating that doctors and medical professionals, rather than trying to give a bit of hope, would sort of say something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the idea, the fact that you can succeed in a business sense is, and I mean, it allows you to sort of you don't have the you've got the freedom, and I mean you're working from home. I mean, the irony with COVID was that I was saying to my husband, I'm actually grateful that I was diagnosed so long ago, because to find out in amongst all these other people and in the midst of all this chaos that I've got mental health issues would not be ideal. I mean, we just sort of bunkered down during lockdown down on the Bellarine, and I just got on with the thing, building the LinkedIn network.
That's great.
And it's just really gone from there.
And how do you use the strengths of bipolar disorder? Because I know a few people who love it because it might give them extra creativity, or there's different things. So what strength do you take from having bipolar disorder?
Well, I think certainly the creativity. I think it teaches you things. Well, I mean, there's another angle too. My husband actually passed away nearly 18 months ago. So I was his primary carer as well. It's, with everything we've gone through with, well, me personally with the bipolar and the pandemic and everything, you realise you've got a strength that you didn't realise you had until you really need it. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
True. Very, very true. Now, how have you found, have you manage, or what's your routine with bipolar disorder? Is it something where your regular visits with your doctor, or how do you manage? Find works best for you?
I'm on regular medication. I'm actually on the medication I was on one medication for wasn't for bipolar, it was for clinical depression, but it was called Effexor, and it had a weight gain side effect.
Yeah.
Very frustrating, because I'd just gone and lost 30 kilos, and within about 3 or 4 months I'd put back on 25 just as a result of taking these blessed tablets. The doctor down on the Bellarine said, well, we can't have you, we've got to get you off this, you can't keep putting on weight like this. It's going to be ridiculous, because other health conditions like type 2 diabetes and all those things don't distinguish as to how you put the weight on. It doesn't matter if you put one through it with antidepressants or whatever. So I had to be weaned off that. For a while there, I remember saying to my psychiatrist in Melbourne, she says, how are you feeling? I said, well, to be honest, I'm feeling fine. She says, oh, yes, well, very good. She says, well, we'll just see how you go. But she knew my grandmother, she treated my grandmother, so she probably thought, she'll be back. And she was. About 4 months after that, I woke up in a massive state of not so much confusion, but certainly anxiety, about 1 a.m, just like Groundhog Day, and it was all happening again. I thought, no, this is not good. So and unfortunately it was in the middle of between Christmas and New Year, and the doctor was away, so I had to wait for the doctor to get back, and finally got to the psychiatrist, and she says, well, now we know. So they put me on a new medication, and I've been on that probably for probably 17 years or so.
Okay, well, that's pretty good, because I know with my mum, she had to change medication all the time because there was
Yeah,
always
yeah.
issues and stuff. So to be on one for 17 years is it's
Yeah, to
a
be at
very different.
least, I reckon it'd be 16, 17 years. I 2006, 2007. So I've been very lucky with the medication. Yeah, just, I mean, certainly, and actually in all that time, I mean, I know of people who've been hospitalised. I've never been hospitalised with it, so
It's a great achievement, actually. Yeah, it's a very
great
impressive
achievement.
achievement.
Yeah, I mean, there have been, I think there have been one or two times where I think, should I, Alex said, do you think you should go to hospital? No, I said, no, and, ride it out. But yeah, no, I've been very lucky in that regard.
And you said something which I want to harp on, because I don't think, I guess, not many people realize, but yeah, the medication with the weight gain effect, there's multiple medications with mental illness who unfortunately do that. And I feel really sorry for the people who have to be on medication, because you're right. It's this weight gain thing, and it's very challenging to deal with, because it's very frustrating. You're eating right and you're doing exercise and stuff, and you keep putting weight on due to the medication, which you have to take, which is a very frustrating thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I mean, I think I've got two out of the three of them, I think, have a weight gain side effect. So, yes, the drug company who comes up with an antidepressant that makes you lose weight will be a very popular drug company indeed.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, well, it's not even just just how it has neutral effect. I think don't even put weight on. I think it'd be a very good thing.
A neutral effect would be good too. Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. It was quite common. I went through the same thing with my mum. It was the same thing. She had the weight gain from the medication, and it was very frustrating for her when she was trying to eat right and do exercise, and then it would happen. I think it's very common. But with managing a business, how have you found that with bipolar disorder?
Oh, quite often it's a barrel of laughs, Joel. Not, but no, it's. I mean, I've learned an awful lot along the way, and but you really need. I mean, I've found you mentioned before. I mean, you have patches where you just can't do it. And you think, oh, I should be doing more, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. But it's like, I mean, you're the boss, and there are a lot of far more efficient entrepreneurs out there, but you're not answerable to anybody. I mean, you're not answerable to an employer or the public service or whatever. So you really are. I mean, I've been on a disability pension probably about 15 years, I think. And you think, oh yes, because the business sort of has its peaks and troughs, but I think it's peaks and troughs with yours truly. So whether that ever is able to be got rid of, but again, you're sort of at the beck and call of the condition. Really, it's a bit like a soft landing.
And let's talk about your business itself. So your business is in crosswords, and you've been. So was that your passion, or was that something in a creative outlet you'd be doing anyway without it being your business? Or how does that come about?
I was a keen crossword puzzler, and then I was thinking about what I was going to do, and I'd actually been writing. I'd run trivia nights for the yacht club that we belonged to and the church we belonged to, and I think I had copious amounts of material everywhere. And I said to Alex, what am I going to do with all this stuff? And it was at the time where we were doing the general knowledge crossword on a Sunday, which my family are very keen on doing. I think I might have a go at writing crossword puzzles. So I got the software and started writing them, and then I moved on to code words, and these are rather good. Go figure. 20 years later, I've developed, what I've done is I've developed because I was a librarian by training, I've actually developed an online resource that public libraries subscribe to.
That's great.
I've gone from one side of the fence to the other. Well, it's really, well, certainly since the pandemic, libraries subscribe. We've got one library down at St Kilda, Port Phillip City Council subscribe, and they have a puzzle club every Thursday morning, which is targeting their older residents. A group get together on a Thursday morning and sit around with iPads and solve puzzles for an hour, and then they go out for coffee.
So is that the business you do? You go there and you run these puzzle events?
I don't. I do. I do go when required, but no. Generally, the library subscribes. They can actually put it on their website, and the members of the library can access it.
Okay.
It can be in the library, or it can be at home, or on a park bench, or in a cafe. So it's fully connected with Wi-Fi, and we update the puzzles regularly, and so
that's great. And which paper, in your opinion, has the best crossword?
Even though it's difficult, I rather like the age crossword.
Okay.
General knowledge one, yes.
And what's the secret to making a good crossword as you make them? How do you come up with it? It's an interesting.
Well, you build the crossword, the software, you build the crossword using the software, and it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. I actually start with the words I actually want. I don't do that. You can just, press the button and it builds the grid, but I don't do it that way. I do it manually, so I can use words that I actually want and get them. And then I research the clues using the dictionary or the encyclopedia or Wikipedia, and the more interesting and devious, the better.
And I wanted to just touch on something real quickly now before we go, is about with the mental health awareness movement now, do you pay much attention to it, or what do you think about? Yeah. So what are your thoughts around the whole thing happening now?
Well, I mean, it's since COVID, it's just really exploded. I'm actually part of a number of different, I'm in Rotary, and for about 7 years, I've been involved with Australian Rotary Health. And I've been on the committee for 2 districts. I'm currently the secretary of the Inner Melbourne district, 9800. So we're always looking to raise awareness and raise funds for mental health research. But I'm also an ambassador for a radio station in the UK, Smile Radio, which is a big supporter of raising mental health awareness.
How'd that come about? That's great.
Well,
in the UK,
I think it was last year, I was involved with a group of English tutors in the UK, and one of them became a radio presenter with said radio station, with Smile Radio. And one day Charlotte says to me, "How would you like to become a radio presenter?" And I thought about it for a while, and I talked to David, the owner of the business, and I thought about it, and because the thought was that we might have an Australian music theme, and then I thought, I really don't think this is me. I can talk on a radio. There'd be spontaneity. It needs spontaneity. It would be what I remember my sister, when she was doing her journalism course, would say, dead air. So I thought, no, I don't think it's for me. So I got talking with David again, and we decided we're going to market puzzling for mental health and mindfulness. So that's what we're working towards at the moment.
Okay, so do you want to talk more about that, puzzling for mental health? What exactly is that, and can you tell people about that?
It works like I was reading an article in Psychology Today 3 or 4 years ago, and it said puzzling is good for your brain because it engages it. So if you're feeling anxious or depressed or flat, if you pick up, it doesn't have to be a puzzle, but just using that as an example, if you pick up a puzzle and become engrossed in solving it, you forget about the issue that was actually bothering you. It may not do it forever, but probably it gives you some respite, and so it's like a diversion tactic.
That makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. That would be something like that. And so is that what you've been doing? Is you've been trying to raise awareness around that, or you're creating
Yeah,
puzzles, or you're trying to get more of
I
that?
actually did a talk in, it was via Zoom while I was moving back to Melbourne last May. I did a Zoom conference to Toronto and Istanbul, and was telling them about all this, thinking, well, it doesn't seem like rocket science to me. They said, oh, we've never thought of this. What a great idea.
It does make a lot of sense, doesn't it? It sounds like a simple idea, but I've never heard of anyone talk about it before you're saying it. So
Yes. So, and the idea behind the libraries, getting involved, bringing people into the library, getting them out of the house. I mean, it gets them out of the house in the fresh air and, talking to people, social connection. They learn something that they may or may not have known before, and yeah, it's builds social skills, and yeah,
builds a bit of confidence, I guess, as well. You're
builds
achieving something, you're
confidence,
solving these
builds your
puzzles. Yeah.
vocabulary. I mean, it's all good stuff.
That's great. And I was just, before we go, I just want to ask you one more thing is about what's some advice, or what have you found best that's worked for you in regards to maintaining mental well-being? Is there multiple of things, or what's some things that you do maybe that others might not, or maybe they can learn from?
Well, I've been thinking I don't do it enough, but I was just saying to my mother last night. Last year, after Alex passed away, I did the March Charge, which is walking or running, in my case, walking, to raise funds for melanoma, and I've been doing that, doing a bit of training because I'm doing it again, and I was looking at my Fitbit the other day and realised I'd done 35 kilometres during February. Oh, and I'm thinking I am feeling. I mean, I sort of had a bit of a flat patch over Christmas. Had a bit on the day before. I think it was yesterday. I was thinking, I'm feeling really good. I've sort of, instead of getting in the car, I've been getting on the train and going to places. So actually, physical exercise and getting the endorphins pumping is really a good thing. And also eating, you've got to eat right. I mean, you've got to eat healthfully. The other thing I'll also mention that I discovered not long ago was there's a mental health food score. Certain things might sound a bit highfalutin, but things like lettuce and spinach are very good for you in terms of mental health. And I discovered when I was eating quite a bit of lettuce and spinach, I was feeling, it was about the time Alex was sick and I was, doing a lot of caring for him. I wasn't sort of going down the bipolar track, which would have been disastrous at that point. Finding the foods that make you feel well, eating well and exercising is probably a good place to start.
And what is it about those foods? Do you know, Catherine? What is it in particular about spinach and lettuce? Because it makes sense, but is there some like vitamin in them, or is there some sort of?
I think there's a vitamin or something that boosts the dopamine or the serotonin or something like that. I'd have to go back over it, but I definitely remember that it was lettuce and leafy greens and spinach. I thought, well, that's not hard.
Great point. Yes, no, you never really hear much about it. You hear about eating for health, so heart disease, whatever. But you ever hear someone saying eating for your mental health? So that's a really, really good point.
So and I just Googled it, mental health food score, and it comes up with quite a few articles and a list. So yeah, I highly recommend that to your listeners. Yeah,
that's great. I'm going to look it up because I've never heard of that before, but it makes so much sense. Yeah, maybe that's something we see in the future that gets mentioned a lot more. So Catherine, where can people find you? So do you want to plug your business in regards to?
That'd be lovely, Joel. Yep. I'm called the Clue Detective Puzzle Agency, cluedetectivepuzzleagency.com, and we have we don't actually, at this point, we don't actually have an individual membership, because we encourage people who want to do our puzzles to go to their public library and recommend it. So, because that way everyone in the council gets free access as part of their membership.
Okay.
So you don't actually pay for it. You just recommend the library subscribe to it.
No worries. So we'll put that link in the description, and hopefully people can check it out and jump on.
Fantastic.
So Catherine, thank you very much for coming on today and sharing your story. I really do appreciate it, and your openness, and it's great to meet you, and hopefully our listeners got a lot out of it. So thank you very much for your time, Catherine. And
thanks, Joel.
I hope you have a great weekend.
You too. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.